Good morning, everyone. As I said, my name is Rose Power. I'm an EU Projects Officer with the Southern Regional Assembly. I'd like to welcome you all here to the ETC Cooperation webinar, and we have a very interesting panel of speakers this morning for you. But we won't keep you too long. We'll try and have you finished by 11:30, and myself and my colleague Karen Coughlin will be moderating the event, and we hope you enjoy it. We'll give you an opportunity to ask questions after each of our speakers. So I'm going to hand over now to Karen, who will take you through some housekeeping.
Hi, thanks Rose. Hi and welcome everybody. As Rose said, I work with Rose in the EU Projects unit here, and I'm an EU Projects Officer. And just to again welcome you all here to the webinar today. So I'm just going to take you through a few quick housekeeping rules, just so we know what we're doing. If Alice could just move that along, thank you. So you'll see on the right-hand side of your screen an orange arrow, and that will allow you to take control of your grab tab. So you choose whether or not you want to keep that open or closed at any stage. You just click on the orange arrow, and that will allow you then to see your drop-down options from there. You'll have noted that when you come into the webinar, you were muted. So let's see if you wouldn't mind next slide. When we come in, you know to be muted and you weren't able to share your camera or screen, and that's because you're in as a participant. So we would ask if you have any questions or comments, if you could please put those through the questions panel, and we'll deal with those accordingly throughout the webinar. You'll also note, if you just my next slide, Alice, you'll also note on the right hand side in your grab tab a hands function. So if you have any issues or anything that you need to draw attention to, please feel free to use that, and you'll see there it's the hand icon that's circled in your grab tab on the right hand side. So just use your orange arrow to extend out your grab tab, and you can use the hands function. We would ask though that any questions that you have, please submit those through the questions panel. Just again to draw your attention to the fact that today's presentation is being recorded, and we will try and have that ready for you within the next 48 hours, and it will be available on our website, but we will let you know when that's available. So just, Alice, if you don't mind just come back a second, we're just going to make sure you're all listening and you're able to use, I suppose, the grab tab and the questions. And I just have a quick question for you all. So I suppose today being a remarkable date that we've left level 5 restrictions, I'm sure we're all very happy about that. And there's a further easing again is on the 18th of December. So we're just wondering, who are you most looking forward to seeing again over Christmas after the 18th, of course, when the restrictions have lifted? So if you could just submit your answer into the function on the right hand side, and we'll be able to just get a quick gauge as to who people are looking forward to seeing over Christmas. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds to input those answers. I know from my point of view, it's my sister and my niece and nephew. I have to say I'm very much looking forward to catching up with them, seeing what's going on. Okay, so Catherine, if you want to maybe give us an idea as to what people have been answering.
Yeah, so we have a lot of people looking forward to seeing family, their parents, and some friends as well. So there's a lot of people are really looking forward to family this year. So
great. And I see Enda's looking forward to seeing his parole officer. Enda, good luck with that. Hope it goes well. Okay, so thanks for participating in that, everybody. Alice, if you wouldn't mind just moving to the next slide. So a question that we're regularly asked actually after these events is what platform we use for hosting the events. And it was an area of interest that was highlighted after the last event that we held. So as an answer to that particular question, we as an organisation use the GoToWebinar platform. Not necessarily one that's going to suit everybody, but it was one that we chose. But what I would like to draw your attention to is the research that we did, I suppose, behind that. And the criteria that we would have assessed the platforms against. Now, it's not an exhaustive list. There's a number of platforms that we didn't look at the time, and a number of platforms that have probably come online since. I suppose this is such a huge area now for everybody in light of the restrictions, and it's expanding all of the time. I won't go through the slide, but just to say it has been uploaded as a handout in the handout section. it hopefully will maybe give you a steer or a guide as to maybe how to frame your criteria if you maybe are looking at procuring one of these meat platforms. Just to say, we're not endorsing any of these, just to note that these were the ones that we found were kind of most suited to us against the criteria that we had set. And again, it's not an exhaustive list. If anybody's any questions around any of these, please feel free to come to us and we'll try and, I suppose, help as much as we can. But just again to note, it's there as a handout in the handout section if anybody wants to go to that and download that. Okay, so I suppose moving on to our agenda today, we have David Kelly, our director, who's very kindly agreed to give us an overview of the upcoming period for both the Interreg Europe programme and the Interreg Northwest Europe programme, both of which we are contact points for. So I suppose I'll ask David to put on his camera and to start the presentation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen. Can everyone hear me okay? I presume. Yeah, I see thumbs up there from Karen. Okay, well, look, thanks very much, Karen, for that. And as Karen said, look, I'm going to give you a very quick, I suppose, introduction to what the new programme period is beginning to look like for both the Northwest Europe programme and the Interreg Europe programme. I suppose my sins, I sit on the monitoring committee for both of these programmes for the current round and also on the programme preparation committee for both of these. But maybe before I get into what it's looking like, for the next round, I might just give you just a brief update on where things are at in the current round. Look, I'll give you a quick background to ETC. I'm sure because you're all sitting on the ETC network, you're probably all very familiar with it, but maybe there might be one or two people who may not be quite as familiar with the whole ETC or European Territorial Cooperation. ETC is one of the goals of cohesion policy, and it has evolved quite a lot since it first began in the mid to late 90s when it was a small community initiative, and then it built up over the period to be one of the two key goals of cohesion policy. It's better known as Interreg, but its formal name is European Territorial Cooperation. I suppose the overarching goal of ETC is around, I suppose, the economic and social and territorial balance or development across the region, across the entire European Union, and it's built on three main strands. The first one is strand A, which is the cross-border. So in the Irish context, that involves in the current round the Ireland-Wales programme and the Northern Ireland, the North-South and the Scotland programme. The next strand then, strand B, is the transnational strand, and this involves a number of EU member states in each of the programmes. So for Ireland, we have the Northwest Europe programme, we have the Atlantic Area programme and the Northern Periphery and Arctic. And then strand C is the interregional programme. So that involves all member states and one or two third-party states as well, like Norway and so on. So this is your Interreg Europe type programme, Interact, or the ORBAC programme, and also the Spatial Policy Support Programme in ESPON. Okay, we're moving on. For the 14-20 period, the programs are built around, I suppose, the 11 thematic areas or the 11 thematic priorities that are set out by the Commission in the regulations, and these equally apply to the ETC programs as they do to the normal mainstream programs. So these are effectively framed or built, if you like, around the smart, sustainable and inclusive growth agenda. So the orange box is smart, the green boxes is sustainable, and the blue one then is around the inclusive growth agenda. The first two would generally be funded through the ERDF type program. So the regional programs in Ireland are funded by ERDF, so they would focus primarily on the orange and the green box, and then the ESF activity would generally fall under the blue box. And this again equally applies to the ETC programs. So the ETC programs would generally focus in on the research and innovation, information communication, climate change, and so on and so forth, and have the inclusive aspect as kind of a more horizontal type team across the programs. Okay, maybe just give you a quick update on the Interreg Europe programme, where it's at today. I suppose at one level this is probably will be very short and very easy. As I said, this is one of the interregional programs, so it's really focused on policy learning, policy improvement across the region. So it really targets, I suppose, public sector organisations or public bodies that are the owners or implementing or trying to improve the policies, the regional policies that they're involved in. It has a budget of 359 million for the entire period. It's built around four priority areas around research and innovation, the competitiveness of SMEs, environment and resource efficiency, and then the whole low carbon economy. I suppose the very quick update on this is that all the funding is allocated. So after 4 calls, so there will be no further calls for this particular program. I think there's around 200,000 left in the pot, so it you know, there definitely won't be a call for that remaining funding. They might try and utilize it in some other way. Ireland has generally done quite well out of this program in that there are 43 projects with Irish partners involved. So I don't know the exact number of Irish partners in that just off the top of my head, but again, Ireland has done relatively well from this program to date. In terms of North West Europe, oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead of myself there. The North West Europe program is one of the transnational programs that Ireland is involved in. The entire country of Ireland is eligible to participate in this program. It's the largest of the transnational programs across Europe, and it involves 8 countries. All of Ireland, as I said, involves the UK, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Switzerland as a third country. So they don't get any ERDF through the program, but they have partners that are allowed to participate in it, and the Swiss government then provide the match funding for them. And then parts of Germany, parts of France, and parts of the Netherlands are included in the program. I suppose because Northwest Europe the Northwest Europe region or part of Europe really considers itself to be the powerhouse of Europe in terms of driving the European economy. I suppose the overall ambition of the programme for the current round is to remain to be that key economic player, not only in Europe, but in the world, but also to create, I suppose, the region as a better and more attractive place to live and work. It's built around 3 priority areas. The first priority area is around innovation, and this is really about supporting the innovation capacity and competitiveness of the SMEs within the region. The second priority area is around the low carbon economy, and so it's that transition to the low carbon economy. I suppose there are 3 specific objectives or 3 key areas in this that we're trying to develop. One is around the uptake of low carbon technologies to improve the reduction in the carbon emissions. The second is around, I suppose, the uptake or the development of low carbon strategies. And then the third area is really targeting, I suppose, the high emitters, the high emitting sectors of greenhouse gas emissions, and trying to get them to reduce their gas emissions, the greenhouse gas emissions. The third priority area then is around resource and materials efficiency, and this is really about, I suppose, moving to the circular economy. So instead of kind of create, use and throw away, it's kind of create, use and reuse, or recycle or repurpose. So that's what that one is about. As I said, it's the largest of the transnational programs. So there's a total funding package of 372 million, or just over 372 million of ERDF. So that's in grant aid. It has a co-financing rate of 60%. So you can see it bulks up quite quickly to quite a sizable program. I suppose in terms of where we are with the program, again, after 9 calls and 1 capitalization call to date, effectively all of the funding has been committed. So we have committed 376 million of the funding. The monitoring committee has agreed, however, that they will allow for an overcommitment, so up to about 103 or 104%. So it does mean that there is some additional funding available. To date, 102 projects have been funded through all 9 calls and the capitalization call, and that's over 1,000 partners are included. With that, there are 80 Irish partners and 48 projects with Irish involvement. So again, this is one of the programs where Ireland really does very, very well. It tends to really punch above its weight. And in fact, Ireland generally gets a lot more back out of this program than Ireland contributes to it as a member state in terms of the funding allocation. So it's a really, really good program for Irish partners to be involved in. As I mentioned, there is a small pot of money still available because the Monitoring Committee has agreed to overcommit to about 103, 104%. So there is a second capitalisation call currently live, and I'll speak to that in a couple of moments. I just struck maybe two maps just very quickly, just to illustrate, I suppose, the point I was making about how Irish partners tend to do really, really well in this program. And you can see, Ireland is in the, I suppose, the dark colours in terms of the distribution of partners. The southern and eastern region does particularly well, and likewise in the next map. In terms of the distribution of funds, again, Ireland is very much in the dark colour, so we tend to do really, really well from this programme and really punch very much above our weight. In terms of the I suppose the last little pot of money that's remaining, I mentioned there is capitalisation call. The second capitalisation call is currently live. It's live until the 21st of January. This is really targeting already existing projects, and already existing partnerships. So it's not really about developing new projects. It's about building on projects that have already been up and running, that have demonstrated that I suppose that some of the results have been really beneficial, but there are opportunities maybe to build on those results and to maybe do some extra work. So this could involve projects working with their already existing partnership, but it also allows for new partners to join already existing projects. So in that context, there still is an opportunity, if partners have not already been involved in the Northwest Europe project or program to date, that they could join an existing partnership to help build on already existing results that have been delivered through the program. So it's open to all projects, both open and closed, from calls 1 to 9, which includes the targeted call on renewable energy. I suppose the only ones that can't get additional funding through this call are projects who would have received funding through the first capitalisation call and who are already working on building up or expanding on the results that they've already achieved through the first round. Okay, in terms of the future then, maybe just to give you a quick flavour of what's happening in the future. You will recall that I mentioned the 11 thematic objectives for the 1420. Well, these have been simplified and consolidated into five key areas. So you have a smarter Europe, a greener low carbon Europe, a more connected Europe, a more social Europe, and a Europe closer to its citizens. And again, these are equally applicable to ETC as they are to the mainstream programs. There are two additional objectives which are specifically set out for the ETC programs, and these are Interreg specific objectives. So that's Europe, a better internet governance and a safer and more secure Europe. So these objectives can be only applied for the ETC programs, and it is up to the ETC programs if they want to deliver the programs only through these two objectives. So they could decide that, look, we feel that our program is better delivered through both of, or either or both of these two objectives, but it still means they can target areas in the other five policy areas or thematic areas. There is a requirement in the current round for thematic concentration. So it is recommended, or is set out in the regulations, that programs would choose one or two of the objectives and focus at least 80% of the funding on those, and then leave 20% then maybe for a kind of a catch-all or mop-up for other areas. So there is that requirement to have that key thematic concentration. Okay, just looking at Northwest Europe, I suppose one of the key changes the next time round, and this isn't only for Northwest Europe, but it applies to all ETC programs in which the UK were traditionally involved, that the big gap is that the UK will no longer be involved in the North Europe program or in ETC generally. And this is a decision that the UK government has made, that they have decided that they, at the moment, they are not anticipating that they will participate in the European Structural Investment Fund programs, and specifically the European Territorial Cooperation. I know from discussions we're having with some of the, I suppose, devolved administrations within the UK, it's not something that they're particularly happy with, and they're going to try and see, is there a mechanism by which they can participate. But at the moment, that's the situation. And look, I suppose from a number of reasons, that'll have quite a number of implications for the programme, but I would also say for Irish partners. When you look at the number of projects that Irish partners were involved in the last time round, I would say somewhere in the region between 60 and 70% of those projects also involved UK partners. And it's not just because they're our near neighbours, but it's because they tend to be strategic partners. So that'll have an implication. The other big implication it will have is that in the 14-20 period, the UK contributed about 33% of the budget to the programme. So whilst it was the largest transnational programme the last time round, the UK contributed 33% of that. So without the UK involvement, there will be a massive hole in the budget. So there are currently discussions ongoing within the programme development committee around how that hole might be filled. You know, and if it is to be filled completely, it would mean quite a sizable increase from all of the other member states, and I'm not sure that I suppose everybody is in that space to fill that gap. So we are looking at other mechanisms, maybe to look at how the gap might be filled net of what the UK partners got. So that might be an easier hole to try and fill. So those discussions are very much underway. I suppose the other key change to the geography is that Switzerland has decided not to participate as a partner state in the next round. And now that doesn't have an implication on the ERDF, but I suppose it probably has an implication in terms of the types and numbers of partners that may be involved in the next round. As I said, the planning is very much underway. It started back in early 2019. A task force has been established involving all of the member states, the participating member states, to start putting the programme together. A consultancy firm was recruited to develop a quite detailed territorial analysis. So all of that has been done. There are a number of working groups in place. The one that I currently sit on is around the teams are looking at the thematic focus of the programme the next time around, and I'll touch on that in a minute or two in terms of what it's beginning to look like, even though I suppose it's a bit like the negotiations on the multi-financial framework and the regulations. Nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, so we're kind of in that space at the moment where we're trying to tease out what the programme might look like. In terms of the time frame, there are quite a number of steps and process we have to go through. So when we kind of get the first shape of what the programme is beginning to look like, there'll have to be a public consultation. There'll be consultation within each of the member states, and then it'll have to come back to the monitoring committee for a formal decision, and before it's formally submitted to the Commission. So it's likely that a first programme will formally be submitted to the Commission, I would say sometime around the middle of 21. So therefore, it's likely that there won't be any open call for proposals until, I would say, probably late 21 or probably early 22. Sorry, I heard a bell there, so I better maybe speed up, move on a little bit. I suppose in terms of what the programme is beginning to look like, and based on the discussions that we've had to date, definitely the policy objective 1, the Smarter Europe and the Greener Europe, are definitely going to be key components of the programme. I suppose where the debate is whether the greener, low carbon Europe should be the key focus and everything else should be integrated into that, or we should have individual priority axes focusing on innovation as well as the low carbon Europe. The Connected Europe is probably most likely not going to be included. There are some debates around how the social Europe might be integrated again, whether there should be an individual policy objective on it, or whether that should be a horizontal theme, and likewise with a Europe closer to the citizens. So I suppose from that, we could probably take it for granted that policy objective 2 is definitely going to be a mainstay. It's going to be there. Innovation is going to be there in some context, but how is really the key question. Okay, very quickly then onto the Interreg Europe programme, and again the planning phase is very much underway. I suppose just a couple of things to note on this. I suppose the first thing is that the Interreg Europe programme was not included as part of the original proposals put forward by the Commission. So in effect, it was been written out of the agenda, but it was brought back in during the negotiations at Parliament and at Council. Look, it's like what I said a few moments ago, that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed, but it's likely that it will remain. So the programme is very much on the way in terms of its planning. You can see the calendar there on the screen in front of you. So again, it's likely it's going to be probably late Q1 into Q2 next year before the programme is formally submitted to the Commission. There is a number of consultants in place working with all of the member states or the partner states on developing this. So the territorial analysis has been done. There's a team of consultants in supporting us in terms of drafting the programme. The shape of it is going to be quite similar in certain aspects to the last time round, in that there are going to be those two strands in terms of improving policy. So the exchange of good practices, the transnational cooperation aspect in that regard, but then also the policy learning platform. So that piece is still going to be there. Exactly what it looks like is still being negotiated. There's also discussions around what the project shape might look like, whether it's going to be like it is this time around in terms of 2 phases, or whether it's all going to be built into one big, large project. I suppose the interesting thing from this programme is that already it has been decided that it is going to be delivered through the Interreg specific objective of better governance. So that's going to be the one single policy objective through which the programme is going to be delivered. But there is going to be a very key focus on PO1 in terms of smarter Europe, and PO2 in terms of the transition to the low carbon economy. So look, that's it. That's where we're at. I suppose in terms of Interreg Europe, the usual partners will still be involved, so it'll really be focused on improving policy. So there will be a key requirement in terms of having public sector organisations involved. It's going to be there's going to be a kind of a loosening to some degree on the requirement to have managing authorities for regional programs involved in every project, so that or definitely the percentage of the requirement of those is going to be loosened somewhat. And the exact level, again, we're still working our way through. So yeah, so look, I'll leave it at that. So that's the update on where things are at with both programs. Look, I'm happy to take any questions.
Hi, David. Thanks for that. That was really interesting and informative. So just to remind anyone that if you have questions, please put them in through the questions function on the right-hand side in the grab tab, as we had indicated at the start. So just we're waiting for those to come in. David, do you mind if I ask a question?
Sure, shoot.
So you mentioned the capitalisation fund, and obviously those that are not currently involved in the Northwest Europe programme can get involved in that. So say partners they're interested in maybe getting involved in the next period, would getting involved in the capitalisation fund now help them put in a stronger application or demonstrate that they've had involvement in it, say in the next programming period?
I would say not necessarily. I think, I suppose from one aspect you could always say that being involved is a help, absolutely, and it gives you a flavour for what's required. I suppose it helps you to build up your network in terms of getting to know additional partners, but it shouldn't penalise you from being involved the next time round. One of the key aspects, I suppose, that we really try to I suppose, pushed through in the current round, and it definitely is something that we're going to bring to the fore in the next time round. It's this whole idea about involving new partners, newcomers to the program, because I suppose you'll see this in most ETC programs. You'll always see the same organizations coming back to the table, and it's because they're so used to it and they know what's involved and so on. But in a sense, that doesn't help with the whole territorial cohesion approach, because if you have them concentrated coming from the same areas, it's not good for the program. So yes, while it will help, it won't be a penalty for not being involved.
Okay, but it would do no harm anyway. If people were maybe thinking along those lines, it'd be a good option to maybe dip a toe into the water.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question in. So can we connect the EU project to national project regarding share funding?
Good question. It's a really good question. I think in terms of policy, absolutely. I think in terms of complementarities and synergies, absolutely. But I suppose the one thing that you will need to ensure is that there is no duplication of the funding in terms of what you're trying to deliver. So you nearly would have to, I suppose, have separate elements or separate phases. One that's funded through the ETC project, and one that is funded through the national scheme. So long as there's no duplication of the funding in terms of how you're using it.
Would they need to maybe point that out if they're going along that route? Would that need to be made very clear, or rather than wait for the question?
I know. I think it would be no harm in terms of setting out how the funding for the project is being delivered. You know, like, I suppose the key is that once it's not been, I suppose, funded twice by an EU source, that's the key element. So if the national project has already been funded through another EU source, I think it's a lot more tricky. If it's directly funded from national funds, I think there probably is a little bit more flexibility in terms of how you might utilize that funding. And look, the key really is that when you're considering your project, speak to the contact point, and they will guide you through that process.
Okay. Then another question. So can you elaborate on what better Interreg governance means as an extra priority in framing Interreg Europe or other programs? It's a very pertinent question, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, look, it's really about, I suppose, supporting supporting the Interreg process in terms of ensuring that there is, I suppose, good and proper participation in the programs, in the schemes, and involving all of the key players in that. You know, so it's that whole kind of multi-level governance approach, that quadruple helix, all of those buzzwords that you can throw around. So it's really about helping the Interreg programs to improve how they deliver the programs in that context. But I suppose the important piece is that it's kind of used as a delivery mechanism, but it doesn't rule out the fact that you can still support activity in the low carbon economy, the innovation, and so on.
Okay, so just to demonstrate that stronger governance then.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. I suppose another question I would have, David, for maybe that might be relevant to people is, I know we don't necessarily have the full outline of the programme yet, but would it be smart for people that are hoping to put funding applications in to start looking at them now, to start getting their plans in place, to kind of know what they're doing, or going down the...
I think you're right, Karen. I think it's no harm to start looking now. I say keep an eye on the website. You have an idea around what the picture of the program is going to look like. The other, I suppose, important aspect will be to, I suppose, participate in the consultation process when it's happening as well. And that's a really good way to engage, and also maybe to start building up networks. Again, I would say, look, get in touch with the contact points as well. You know, because they can guide you. And just to say for everyone that there is a vacancy for the Northwest Europe contact point at the moment, but is in our organisation, but it's currently been advertised. So we hope to have that filled by the end of the year. So that person will be there to help and support. But absolutely, Karen, you're right. People should start kind of looking at it now, start thinking about it now, start thinking about what their priorities are, and then who they would need to partner up with to help deliver on those priorities. And if all of that is in place, then you're probably ready to hit the ground running when the first call does go live towards the end of next year or early into 22.
Okay. Okay, well, I think that's all the questions we have at the moment. Thanks very much, David. Obviously, any more we can direct them through. That's great. Thank you very much. I think Rose, thanks, David. I think Rose is going to introduce our next speaker.
Hello, everyone. I'd like to introduce you now to Dr. Kieran McCarthy, who is a councillor and member of Cork City Council and also a member of the European Committee of the Regions. He's going to provide you with a presentation on the role of the European Committee of the Regions and the future of Europe. And if you have any questions for Kieran, by all means use the questions box on the grab tab on the right-hand side, and after his presentation we'll try and address as many of those questions as possible. I'll hand over to you now, Kieran.
Thank you. Okay, good morning to everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak. I can tell you that the Committee of the Regions for me has been an enormous journey. I suppose my backstory is that I've been an independent city councillor with Cork City Council the last 11 years, but somewhere at the start of somewhere at the end of my 6th year, I got a phone call, I would deem it a very random phone call from the Department of Local Government, saying, would I be interested in being a member on this European Committee of the Regions? And I expressed honesty at the time with the department that I'd never heard of the European Committee of the Regions. I think there was a passing sentence that I once actually read. And so the phone call was in December, late 2014, and then by early February, or 2014, early February 2015, I found myself in Brussels and at this particular building. And I spent the first kind of 2 years learning about EU policy, about EU jargon, and getting my head around kind of the different committees of the European Committee of the Regions. And in essence, it is about bringing Europe closer to the citizens, and it's got this really fantastic story that sometimes people actually don't know about. And I think I've spent much of my first 6 years now with the Committee of the Regions, I suppose, standing up on the floor of the Committee of the Regions going, look, we need to tell the story more of what this committee actually does. So it is a formal EU institution, and it does represent 320, it represents 1 million local politicians across the EU, and there's 324 members representing the 27 member states. Like technically at NUTS 3 level, you're talking about maybe something like 280 regions across the EU. So like Ireland has 3 regions, and so when I got on the European Committee of the Regions, my mind was open to other regions and other cities, and what actually is happening in other parts of Europe. Like my mindset was very much on what was just happening in Ireland, and I've always said on my own council floor that actually from a Cork perspective we usually have this obsession with Dublin, and we have in Cork we do have a second city kind of syndrome. And but I began to discover there are other second cities and other second regions, and they're all doing really interesting work, and there are things that Cork can actually borrow from. The Committee of the Regions, when I joined it, it's an opinion body. It still is an opinion body. It gives opinions. Its opinions are on its website. If you Google European Committee of the Regions, it gives opinions on a whole range of topics that affect kind of local and regional authorities on the ground. Like 80% of EU funding goes to local and regional authorities. So we need to have a role in that. And that's the Committee of the Regions keeps pushing that sort of narrative that please listen to us. The mayors, the councillors, the regional presidents have a lot to say on that. And it does have this kind of citizen-led vision, kind of giving kind of bottom-up perspective. So when I did put on the headphones for the first time 6 years ago, I mean, there are, we say, the 24 languages. But when I got the translation of the languages, a lot of the problems that other members were discussing were the same as my own city in Cork, in terms of environment or mobility, social issues. And so it became something actually very exciting for me, because I'm a geographer by trade. My PhD is in geography and historical geography. I give walking tours of my city. And you'll notice that as I go through this short presentation, there are images of Cork, because one of the challenges that I have is trying to reconcile all the information I get in the European Committee of the Regions through the different committees and the different debates, and how do I bring that back to a local council like Cork? And how do I actually try to adapt some of those elements? And because I'm just one councillor of 31, how do I convince actually the the different political groups within Cork City Council. Look, let's have a look at this. We are very blessed in Cork City Council. We have a very active European policy officer, Ronan Gingles, who I worked with on an opinion on the EU urban agenda about 2 to 3 years ago. So I know Ronan well, but how do I bring that information back to Ronan? How do we actually kind of use this information on the ground? And that's something as well I keep saying at the COR kind of plenaries and different commission meetings, like this information needs to make sense on the ground. So it has to go beyond the jargon as well. So here is these 280 regions. And one of the things I began to say on my own city council floor, especially probably in the last year and a half, is that like Cork needs to take its obsession around what's happening with Dublin and kind of other regions and casting its eye kind of further afield. And one of the things, like Cork is a member of a thing called the Atlantic Cities ARC Forum. And there are many European forums and agencies kind of around Europe representing kind of different macro regions and elements like that. But like I've said that to my own council, like Cork is just one of 500 cities in Atlantic Europe. Waterford is one of 500 cities in Atlantic Europe. Dublin is the same. Limerick is the same. Belfast is the same. Like, so we need to keep our eye on what's happening with investment, not just in Ireland, but like in the UK and France and Spain. Like France is only 500 kilometers or so from us to the south, and like investors don't care as long as they get their money back and get a return for their money. So we need to keep an eye on that. So that's one of the things that. Another thing that I've actually learned from being on the Committee of the Regions is just to widen your gaze. The COR is deeply influenced by a number of things, and these particular topics here, we constantly come back to them. I mean, the thing about being on a committee for 6 years is that there are going to be the same themes that come up again and again and again, and then you kind of have to make the point going, well, what did we agree on the last time, and where are we at now, and how do we push that narrative forward? So we're constantly talking about regional disparities between regions, between cities, and we're constantly talking about social disparities, unemployment, and the territorial demands for infrastructure, the calls for investment into good broadband, the need for responses to climate change adaptation, solutions to cross-border challenges, enhancing the connection between local government and regional national government, and also the last year we've the last few months really looking at this kind of post-COVID narrative. So what will the recovery look like? How do we actually release the REACT EU funds, the emergency funds to member states and filter those down onto local and regional authorities? And I suppose another narrative that I've probably pursued the last year in my own council, and I suppose by default I'm a member of the Southern Regional Assembly as well, is that local authorities need to fight more for EU funds, because something like €1 million, which could be pocket change in EU terms, in EU financial terms, creates a public park or a new bridge in a city such as Cork, and that has been the case with the Mary Ellen's Bridge, and also we're working on a park at the moment, the Marina Park, in the southeast side of Cork City, and so it's important that local government are aware, and I'm a big advocate as well, that every local authority in Ireland should actually have a European development officer, European knowledge development officer, European funding officer, somebody actually go on the ground, European research officer, and that's something that I've asked for as well, that we keep fighting for at Southern Regional Assembly level. I suppose the COR is trying to chase this kind of post-crisis Europe narrative as well. The last 2 years, like anytime I went to Europe, they kept talking about Europe in crisis and the EU in crisis. And the thing about the Committee of the Regions is that the more you kind of throw yourself into the debates, the more you're actually, the COR actually pulls you in to be someone they can send to different cities and regions to represent them. And the more I was standing up to kind of debate issues and putting issues forward, the more actually they were sending me on field trips and on kind of these 2 or 3 day missions to Poland or Slovakia, in particular into Eastern Europe, and places I'd never, before I joined the COR, I'd never actually gone beyond Germany. In terms of east of Germany, never been to Poland, Slovakia, Romania, Bulgaria, and my eyes were completely opened kind of on that journey as well. But everywhere I was sent into, we'd say on field work and on a COR mission, people asked me the same question, like, are we on the right track? And some places that I went into, they were looking at their problems, and they wanted to turn their problems into opportunities. They wanted to turn their ambition into growth and stability. They wanted to kind of turn, they wanted to kind of create kind of added value. So, and I was kind of sent in to talk about the Committee of the Regions and the work they're doing in the different work programs. And I want to share some of that with you actually as we kind of go on. The added value paradigm is extremely important to the Committee of the Regions, like the sharing of best practice and knowledge. You would imagine that if you have 320 members in the room, some of them are mayors, regional presidents, local councillors, the amount of knowledge is enormous. And I've always kind of said that that is a major value for the Committee of the Regions. People within the European COR works very closely with the European Commission and its different Directorate Generals or different DGs. And some DGs we have a closer relationship than others. So we have to keep kind of pushing our opinions. So if we do an opinion document, like you can't just, it'll go to the European Commission, but you need to follow it up. You need to make a phone call. You need to kind of send an email. You need to meet the person on Zoom or on WebEx and get a sense of where they're coming from. But sharing best practices is important. Also to see borders as some sort of frontiers of ideas. It's not just a border like that you're restricted going from one area to another. That there are ideas, especially cross-border projects. We've seen what the peace projects have done in Northern Ireland, and we've seen the other kind of we say dozen or so projects as well between Northern Ireland and the Republic and what they have done to enhance peace, but also bring an added value to the local communities there. And we've also seen as well what the Ireland-Wales programme actually has brought to the country as well. Inclusiveness and connections are important, partnership and opportunity. Sometimes, I think in Ireland we do partnership very well, but when you go to Eastern Europe, they don't do partnership as well. There's a lot of historical legacies of kind of past communist practices, and so it's difficult for everyone to get around the table to discuss things. And that's kind of one of the things I also learned, that like partnership isn't easy. It actually takes work. And also the Committee of the Regions, because it's made up of 327 members, it takes work. Everyone's coming from different perspectives. And dialogue is important, respecting the diversity and unity, interoperability between kind of regions, especially around the cross-border. How does that actually work? So these are all they're also interesting narratives, and the Committee of the Regions has been working on. Now, but if you take some of those European jargon words and plug them into cities and regions, you do get a type of what I call acupuncture treatment of cities and regions. I have a lower back problem. I'm into horse riding and got thrown from a horse about 3 years ago in a lower back operation, and I'm getting acupuncture ever since, and I get about 25 needles into my lower back every week. And the thing about acupuncture is that it's not going to solve your lower back in 1 week. It actually takes time to spread out the muscle and to get the muscle actually working. And I always think as well that these kind of added value elements and the narratives that COR actually works on, they're also like pins kind of going into cities and regions. You're not going to change things overnight. Some regions, you might change things over a few short years. Other regions will take you a longer time to change. But certainly if you use this kind of acupuncture treatment, as I call it, you can reimagine cities as the future of Europe. That apart from member states doing all the heavy lifting of building the EU, there's a huge role for cities and regions within the future of Europe. Huge role for cities and regions to build the growth that the EU actually needs. A huge that we have more place-based thinking, that like one size doesn't fit all the member states in terms of policies coming down from the European Commission. Also, we can begin to look at cities and regions as laboratories, places where you can sit down, discuss items and kind of move forward, as learning platforms, as test beds, as champions of looking beyond, we say, GDP indicators, like cities and regions as innovators. And these things are also very important to the Committee of the Regions. Now, in terms of other kind of aspects, I mean, yeah, funding is important to the Committee of the Regions. And we do have a lot of discussion on ERDF and ESF and EIB, and we do kind of, as I say, send on the COR opinions, and we do have knowledge exchange platforms. We do a lot of work on Champion Horizon Europe and ESPON and EU Urban Agenda, and it does sound like that we look at everything, but yeah, anything that actually affects cities and regions, we do actually have a look at. Now, in terms of some of our recent kind of campaigns, we were actually defending cohesion policy during the MFF discussions. We are promoting the Green Deal on the ground. We're still going after the regional disparities, leading the way in the future of work. still constructing these kind of quadruple helixes and kind of partnerships. We're still look at things like the digital single market, the EU social pillars, and these things are probably important. Like that apart from Interreg, like the COR does actually champion Interreg, but we also have knowledge exchange platforms at the European Commission, especially in one of our commissions, SEDEC, which is about innovation and kind of SME development. We do have cross-border projects as well, EGTC, European Groupings Territorial Cooperations. We have Science Meets Regions programs. We champion the iCapital Awards, the European Capitals of Culture, Sport, Green, etc., the Urban Agenda for the EU, and also we've got a big Communicating Europe program as well, where members are encouraged to host kind of citizen dialogues. So that's, I'm going to just park it there. So you can see that we're involved in many things. But if, I suppose one of the questions that was given to David just before he closed is that, should you start preparing straight away for your ETC project? Yeah, you should, and where you can get information of best practice is from the Committee of the Regions website. So if you're doing something on environment, just put in environment or Green Deal into the Committee of the Regions, and you'll bring up the relevant opinions. Or also, like if you go into EU, if you Google EU Futurium and put in urban agenda for the EU, you'll bring up these 14 partnerships that talk about different things about cities and different projects going on. So we're also heavily involved in the European Week of Cities and Regions. So we try to do a lot of practical stuff. So when I joined the Committee of the Regions, probably 80% of their work was just opinions, 20% of the work communication. 5 years later, we're probably doing 60% opinions, 40% communication. We're still doing the same amount of opinions, but we're doing a lot more kind of communicating what's going on. So thanks very much.
Kieran, thanks very much for that. I think that gave a flavour for everyone attending today of what it is the Committee of the Region, the European Committee of the Regions actually do. I had the benefit of seeing your full presentation in advance of your presenting this morning, and obviously due to time you haven't gone through all your slides, but just so that everyone is aware, we'll make the full presentation available to everybody after this event. I just would like to thank you first of all for presenting this morning, but also to just ask you a quick question. When I was looking at, in particular, the survey that was done reflecting on Europe and the results, one of the surprises that I saw there was that they highlighted the main problems, the respondees to that survey, as being problems reported was mobility and public transport, unemployment and youth policies. I suppose what I was very surprised about was that the environment didn't rank higher in relation to those results. And I'm just wondering if you have any views on why that might be the case.
I think the survey, I think that survey actually is at the end of my presentation, I think you're referring to. I think the survey was done 2 years ago. And I think in the meantime, we've had a green wave in terms of there's been this green movement, new kind of green politicians in the last kind of 2 years. I know in Cork City Council, like the Green Party went from 0 councillors to 4 councillors last year. So my gut is that it's improved since that survey was taken. And also in the meantime, like the Commissioner for Environment, or the Commissioner for the Green Deal, Frans Timmermans, has been rolling out programs and has met local and regional authority associations, so formally like the Committee of the Regions and other organisations as well, to go, look, can you promote Green Deal practices on the ground? So actually in the last 3 months, the Committee of the Regions actually has launched a Green Deal subcommittee, and we've actually put up different kind of best practices from different cities and regions. So I put up 2 from Cork just to get that ball rolling. So there's probably like maybe 25, 30 up at the moment, but the intention is that every city and region would actually have up this kind of Green Deal practice. And one of the elements that I found as well, I mean, I think a lot of people have their own personal opinion on the environment, but they mightn't necessarily know what's going on actually at European level. Like the Green Deal at European level is still being hammered out. It's still being hammered out within the MFF. I think it is said that perhaps 37% of the new MFF will all be about the Green Deal, but the detail of that is still quite sketchy, and of course it hasn't been kind of formally passed yet, and we haven't kind of began the process because of the rule of law issues with Poland and other member states in the East. But there is, I think, and there is an environment kind of wave going on, and I know in my own council that I'd say every week or at least get 1 or 2 emails on the importance of parks and trees, and I think that's actually very positive. That's very positive.
Probably be fair to say, Kieran, that if they undertook that survey again in 12 months' time, it might highlight the environment higher up the ranking in relation to problems, maybe.
Yeah, and I think COVID has completely highlighted the importance of public spaces, and like we've all enjoyed our local public park in the last few months just to get out and about, because we've been restricted, we can't travel abroad, and so many of us are spending hours on end looking at WebEx and looking at Zoom presentations. I know I have anyway. I mean, all my Committee of the Regions work has gone online, so I could be dealing with 3 days of COR plenary work. We have 6 plenaries per year in the Committee of the Regions, and it's tough going. And so my local park, the Marina in Cork, and the Fitzgerald's Park in Cork, and the Trummoor Valley Park in Cork have all become very important to citizens. And actually recently we closed one of our old historic avenues in Cork to cars recently during the COVID pandemic, the Marina. And recently we had a public consultation asking the public how many people wanted actually closed permanently. And 250 people submitted their opinions, and 224 wanted closed permanently. And I can tell you a year so, and 21 people wanted to drive their car down it to have a shortcut to work. There's a revolution going on, and so the EU has a role as well in pushing that revolution and connecting more to the ground, providing funding international level, and that it needs to filter down to local and regional authorities, like my own Cork City Council. But yeah.
Okay. I have a question in from Claire Loughnane, and she wants to know, how hard is it to get buy-in locally for a best practice and also a local example for Cork?
I think we've been lucky in Cork. I think there's been a few of us that have been nearly acted as acupuncture pins. I know I've been quite active around kind of elements of the environment and built heritage, because they're kind of my fields. We've been doing a lot of work during COVID on getting more buy-in, so more local buy-in around placemaking in particular. So, for example, during the summer, Cork Healthy Cities, which we're a World Health Organization Healthy City, Cork officially. We're also UNESCO City of Learning, and they kind of teamed up with the Cork City Sports Partnership, and they actually hosted online seminars with a placemaker expert, Cynthia Nixon, who's based in New York. So Cynthia did these workshops, rang in from New York, and we did 6 weeks of workshops on a Tuesday, and there was like 30 of us actually on it. So some of us were local councillors, and some of us were involved in city council, and some of us we had an interest in EU stuff, and we actually came up with a program on how to develop how we use the River Lee actually better, and how we use the riverbank better. And so that program, I think, is somewhere online, or certainly Claire can email me, I can send on some information. So Cork is tipping away as much as possible in trying to get people to work together more. I think the key is to bring people around the table, and that people actually have an openness. So I hope that answers some of Claire's question.
I have another question in from someone who you're familiar with, Ronan Gingles. And
he can answer the question himself.
He wants to know, beyond reporting to the Southern Regional Assembly meetings, are there any structures or arrangements in place to update local authorities that don't have a membership of the National European Committee of the Regions delegation as to what's happening or coming down the line, input and opinions? So is there any kind of reporting structure for those that are not represented on the European Committee of the Regions?
No, there's no formal structure. I mean, it's one of my bugbears as well, as that there should be like an email, a newsletter sent out to each one of the 90,000 local and regional authorities in the EU saying, look, this is what's actually going on. get onto your local managing authority. I would have to say, though, from my experience, that the managing authorities are very good for connecting in with their local authorities. That's my experience. And I mean, I speak from being a member of the Southern Regional Assembly as well, and their managing authority experience has been second to none. I know they're on every day to Cork City Council, running through what programs are going on. And I know like Ronan does a fab job. He's very active every day in trying to trace down programs and finish up programs and liaising with people. But my gut is that, and I suppose I'm lucky, I sit in one of the commissions called the Coter Commission, which is actually on the cohesion funds and the communication of the funds and the dissemination of the funds. And I've actually met many of the managing authorities over the years they come into the committee and they kind of give a presentation. So yeah, no, the managing authorities are very good, but certainly, yeah, it's one of my bugbears. There should be like a monthly newsletter to each one of the 90,000 local authorities. It's an ongoing battle because some COR members just want the COR to be an opinion body, full stop. They mightn't see it having a role of communication and really kind of pushing the role of the local media authorities more. Others want it to be like a Senate, that they're like we have the same powers, we have similar powers to the European Parliament. So like in Ireland, we've got Dáil Éireann and Shannon. So there's actually a group of COR members that want us to be like senators within the European Parliament. But certainly for us to become the other extreme, we need to do a lot more work in kind of becoming more visible. And that's some of the narrative I've been pushing. I'm very, very lucky that I'm now a president of the Conference of Presidents. So I'm one of the party whips within the Committee of the Regions. So I'm there in that kind of that top board of 7 people kind of making decisions. And one of the things I pushed for during the summer months is that the COR set up a COVID Explained knowledge platform that cities and regions get to exchange. How are they actually treating COVID? What are their responses? And so that actually it's been very interesting to see the findings of that. And that's a presentation for another time.
We'll have to hope, Kieran, that you'll be able to influence them so that we do maybe get a newsletter out to the other local authorities to just keep people informed of what great work the European Committee of the Regions is doing. I'd like to thank you very much this morning for your presentation, and hopefully it gives everyone a flavour of what you're doing within the European Committee of the Regions. And as I said, the full presentation will be made available to all participants. So thanks very much, Kieran.
Yeah, thank you, Rose.
I'm going to hand now back over to Karen.
Thanks very much, Rose, and thanks, Kieran. I suppose just to say, if anybody's interested in any more initiatives that are happening that was mentioned by Kieran with the Committee of the Regions, feel free to ask and we can try and circulate details of those. Okay, so our next speaker is Enda Hogan, who's a programme executive here working on the regional operational programme with the Southern Regional Assembly. And I suppose just to note that COVID, I suppose, has forced us, as we all know, to make kind of unprecedented changes to how we work at the moment. And this has impacted the work of the regional operational programme. So Enda's going to give you kind of an overview or insight into the changes that have been made. But you will note that we have noted that there could be implications for Interreg Europe projects. So those that maybe have chosen to influence or to demonstrate some form of improvement on the regional operational programme within their action plan may need to just take note of the changes and reflect and see if it's going to impact them in their work and maybe achieving the objectives that they've outlined in their action plan. And if you have any questions following Enda's presentation, obviously please feel free, like we said, to put them through the questions function on your right hand side. Or if you want to maybe have a think and just see maybe longer term what the implications are, obviously feel free to get in contact with us after this. So I'm going to pass you over to Enda. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Karen, and good morning to everybody. And look, for those of you, if you're not involved in an Interreg Europe Regional Action Plan, you may just find it interesting to have an idea of both the shape of the regional operational programme before the COVID pandemic and the shape of it afterwards, just to see what has happened in this space. Just before we get into it, a quick reminder about Interreg Europe and the difference between it and other Interreg projects. Interreg Europe is all about improving policy and practice, so it helps regional and local governments across Europe to develop and deliver better policy. And a great many Interreg Europe projects are attempting to bring about changes in the design or the implementation or the governance of ERDF co-financed operational programs. These changes then are set out in a regional action plan, and that's one of the key outputs of every project. So in the example mentioned on this slide, the Maori project, which is one that's within the Southern Regional Assembly, we're a project partner, you can see that one of the listed actions within the regional action plan is to enhance governance of responsible research and innovation principles in the implementation and the monitoring of the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme. So let's just take, so in Ireland there are 2 regional operational programmes. They're co-financed under the Regional Development, European Regional Development Fund. There's the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme, approximate value of 500 million. And then there's one, the Border Midland West ROP, approximate value of about 320 million. And both programs are 50% co-financed, so 50% ERDF, European money, and 50% national funding. The next slide, please. If we look at the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme, you have 5 key priorities there. So priority 1 is around research and innovation, priority 2, ICT, broadband, priority 3 is microenterprise, priority 4 is low carbon, and priority 5, urban development, sustainable urban development. If you go to the next slide, the funding under the 5 key priorities was allocated to a selection of schemes under these priorities. And the schemes are delivered through intermediary bodies or government bodies, typically agencies, with the exception of the Designated Urban Centre Grant Scheme, or DUGS as it's called, which is under priority 5. And in that case, there is no intermediary body. The Southern Regional Assembly acts as the intermediary body in that case and issues the grant awards. At the end of 2019, all funding was fully allocated. So under each of these schemes, all of the funding under the operational programme was fully allocated. And the main focus really was expected to be declaration of expenditure to draw down on the ERDF funds. And then along came the global pandemic. So if we come on to the next slide. The EU Commission's response to the global pandemic was to create new legislation, this Coronavirus Response Investment Initiative. And really what CRE, as it's called, and CRE Plus were about, were amending the CPR, the Common Provision Regulations, to allow for far greater flexibility in terms of reprogramming or reallocation of funds, in terms of the eligibility of expenditure, perhaps that has already taken place on coronavirus response initiatives within member states, and also to offer 100% financing rather than this 50% co-financing. So that 100% financing is available for activities under new schemes, coronavirus response schemes, to the end of June of next year. So a decision was made in Ireland to avail of the flexibilities under CRE and CRE Plus. Effectively, we look to see what expenditure had yet to be declared under these under the operational programme, and 122 million worth of ERDF under the Southern and Eastern Operational Programme was reprogrammed, moved away from the existing schemes to the health support scheme, a new health support scheme. And this was approved by the Monitoring Committee in September 2020, and following that there was a Commission decision to approve the changes in October 2020. And just to note, in Ireland the reprogramming wasn't done in order to take funding away from schemes. The expectation is that if ERDF funding is withdrawn from a scheme, it'll be funded entirely from exchequer funds. The main aim of the reprogramming is to draw down as much ERDF funding from Europe as possible within the shortest time frame possible. So not to be waiting for into next year and the year after and the year after to declare all of our expenditure, really to declare as much ERDF as possible and draw down on funding. So the following slides will show the impact on the programme in terms of ERDF funding. So this is the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme before the pandemic and before CRE, and you can see the bulk of the funding there, 37% of it, was towards priority 1, research and innovation, and the next largest amount I think there is for low carbon economy, so better energy, warmer homes, and social housing retrofit. If you move to the next slide, you'll see a very different picture. You can now see that nearly half of the ERDF funding under the OP has been reallocated to this new priority coronavirus response. And specifically, that's one new scheme called the Health Support Scheme. And within that, it's really all being allocated towards the purchase of PPE. And you'll have heard various figures mentioned on the news over the course of the year in terms of the expenditure on PPE. It's just staggering how much we are having to spend on PPE, and that's replicated across Europe. So if you move to the next slide again, we look again at the list of schemes before the reprogramming, and if we ask the question, how many of these schemes will now be declaring further expenditure and outputs under the operational program? So how many of them will come back to our monitoring committee and report on progress with new data? If you move to the next slide, you can see radical difference there. Really, you're looking at priority 1, 2, and 3 are gone. The Better Energy Warmer Home Scheme will continue under priority 4, but probably only for 1 more year. The DUGS projects under priority 5 will continue to declare expenditure and to report progress. But you'll see there's no expenditure and no outputs will be reported under priority 1, 2, or 3, and priority 4 is limited to Better Energy Warmer Homes. And of course, then we'll see new expenditure and outputs reported under the Health Support Scheme. So in terms of the implications, if you'd like to move to the next slide for me, please. The implications for Interreg Europe regional action plans, really you have to ask yourself these questions. Does your regional action plan include an action to influence the Southern and Eastern Regional Operational Programme? And obviously if it doesn't, then you've no concerns. But if it does, then the next question then to ask is, does it seek to influence a scheme that is no longer ERDF co-financed and won't therefore be reporting further expenditure and outputs? Again, if the answer is no, then you're okay. But if the answer is yes, then further action is required. And this might include contacting the intermediary body and or ourselves as managing authority, just to clarify what the impact on the scheme is and on your regional action plan. You should inform the lead partner and or the joint secretariat and agree next steps if you see it as having a major impact in terms of your ability to deliver on your action plan. Then it's best to keep everyone informed, and also keep a clear record. Maybe you won't need to change your action plan if it depends really at what stage you're at, but you perhaps will need to keep a clear record of the impact of any change for reporting. So really the key is, see does the change, the reprogramming impact on your regional action plan, and if you believe it does, don't wait. Make contact with your intermediate body or the managing authority. Talk to us and we'll advise as best we can, and make sure that your lead partner is aware of any changes. Okay, Sinead, thank you very much, and I'm happy to take any questions.
That's great, thanks very much, Enda. I can see there's a lot of changes going on there, but I suppose you can't really argue against where the money has been diverted into. Just we're waiting to see if any questions come in. Do you think this may impact, I suppose, the future programming period, how the money will be distributed?
Yes, in that it's already, I suppose, having an impact in terms of the expectation of the Commission and the priorities that are being set at European level. Effectively, the next programming period is now going to be about recovery and rebuilding our economies and addressing all of the damage that has been done and is being done to European economies. So yeah, absolutely. There is some further funding under kind of a supplementary program called REACT-EU as well, but that may not come into ERDF. Ireland will be able to avail of some funding under REACT-EU, which will in effect be like a supplementary budget for the current ESIF funding in Ireland, but it's possible that that'll all go in the direction of ESF rather than coming into ERDF funding. And that's probably because, you know, under ESF, you're looking at the reskilling and addressing unemployment. So there's a very real need there for funding programs already in place, if you like.
Okay, I don't see any questions coming in. Just to note, it doesn't have to be in relation to the impact on the Interreg Euro projects. If anybody has any questions on the, I suppose, the change in direction in the operational program, feel free to ask them. And I suppose just to reiterate what Enda had said, is just for those Interreg Euro projects that are looking to influence this current operational program, just supposed to reflect back and see will this change in outputs or change in reporting impact what you're trying to do, and if so, how, and what's the best way then to, I suppose, to address that. Okay, I don't see any questions. Everyone's gone quite shy, or you covered everything very succinctly, Enda.
Fine, no problem at all. Look, my details are on the website anyway. If anyone wants to contact me afterwards, there's no problem at all.
Okay, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, well, thanks, Enda. I think that's the last of our presenters. So I'm going to hand you back over to Rose for a moment. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Karen. Just to let everyone know that's attending today, at our last event, it was highlighted to us that there's a lot of new project officers involved in ETC programs, and what might be beneficial to them is if that we created a glossary of terms for them. So at the outset, we have been working in the background to put this together for new EU project officers, but we'd like to run a quick poll with you at the moment. So Maria, if I could ask you if you could put the poll up. And we're going to run a poll to ask you what does the European acronym DUGS refer to? And you will have noticed that Enda did mention it in his presentation also. So do you think that DUGS refers to develop, understand and communicate global strategy, defer until Christmas goods are sourced, designated urban centres grant scheme, or design undergraduate commercial grade system? So I'd like to ask everyone if they could please select which you think is the correct explanation for the acronym DUGS. We'll just give you a couple of moments to see, to just answer that poll. Okay, and Maria, if most people have answered the poll, you might put up the results of the poll. Okay, so we have a 93% of people selected designated urban centres grant scheme. Well done, that's the correct answer. But you will notice that a few people may have chosen the incorrect answer, which just goes to show that even people that are attending here this morning are finding maybe some of the acronyms in Europe to be very difficult and not very clearly evident as to what they should be. We can close the poll there now, Maria, please. As a result of that, we made the decision to start putting together, as I said, this glossary of terms, but we're now looking for your help. We've put together an Excel spreadsheet with as many terms as possible that we can think of, but we'd like to pass this out to you after today's event and ask for you to add to that list any other terms that you've come across that you think might be useful to a new EU projects officer. And what we'll do is when we get your responses back, we'll then put a booklet together that we'll be able to disseminate amongst all EU project officers that are members of the ETC network, and hopefully that will be passed on and useful to any new project officers that are appointed after that. So we'll send it out after the event, and we're hoping that you will come back to us by the 11th of December with any acronyms that you'd like to include in it, and then we'll finalise the booklet. In addition to that, I just wanted to let you know that the Southern Regional Assembly have created a dedicated space within our website, and I think one of my colleagues is putting that link now into the chat function. And in there you will find details of the ETC network. You'll also find the past events, and within past events, you'll find all of the presentations that have been presented at any of our events, plus a recording of the overall event and recording of the individual presentations. So you'll have that information available to you, and we'll obviously have a history of that so that it may be useful again to newly appointed project officers to give them some more insight into what we're doing. Following this webinar today, we're going to ask you to complete a short survey. And the benefit of the survey and the purpose of the survey is, as you'll all know, we as the Southern Assembly are the facilitators of this ETC network, but we're not the owners of it. You, the members, are the owner of this network. And it's only by completing the surveys that we ask you to do can we drive the agenda going forward to be as beneficial and as useful to the members of the ETC network. So we're asking you to please put a little bit of thought into answering the survey, because this is what informs us as to where we need to go with the agenda for our forthcoming events. So if you could take the time today after the event to complete that, it would be very much appreciated. I'd like to now ask all of our presenters and organisers if they could please turn back on their webcams. I would like to take this opportunity to thank our speakers, to thank Enda, Kieran and David for your very interesting and informative presentations, which I'm sure the ETC members have found very useful here this morning. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank Catherine, Alice and Maria, who are the organisers of this event, and while you may not see them on the day, they're certainly in the background assisting and supporting the smooth transition of these webinars. So thank you very much, ladies, for all your hard work. It's very much appreciated. And I'd like to finally just take the opportunity to say thank you very much to all our attendees. We really appreciate your support for this network. And in addition to that, we're hoping that sometime next year, hopefully in Q1, we may be able to hold a physical event, a workshop type event, and we look forward to hopefully meeting you in person in 2021 at some point. So on behalf of the Southern Regional Assembly, thank you very much for your support this year. Have a lovely Christmas and a safe Christmas, and enjoy meeting up with your family and friends after the 18th of December, and fingers crossed we'll be able to meet you all in person next year. Take care and thanks very much.
Thank you very much.